Today's our topic is about the session table or the connection table in the FortiGate, and this is one of the very useful commands that we use while troubleshooting a FortiGate or any issues related to FortiGate connections. So if we see, like, if we want to see how many total number of sessions exist on the firewall, what is the current state of the firewall, or which policy ID it's using, we use the session table or the session commands for that. I know these details can be seen in the 40 event logs, but the logs in the FortiGate event only comes once it's either uh, allowed or denied, but may not contain all the details. But session table from the CLI exactly gives more details about this. So let's begin. So as I told, I am going to discuss all about the session table in the FortiGate. Let's start. So the important command for that is diag session stat. So it's not only stat, but we'll see the other options as well, which are after diag session, and we'll discuss more onto that. So as you can see on the screen, I have a output from diag session stat. So once you see this output, you can see uh, it gives all the information like how many connections are currently existing on the firewall. So if you see here, I have explained each parameter. The first is session count. So session count is currently how many sessions are there on the firewall. So as I have a lab firewall, it says total number of connections is 13. Then setup rate. So setup rate is basically the average number of new connections per second. So you can say the total number might be 13 or 2000 or 2 million depending on your firewall. So setup rate is how many connections or new connections you are getting per second. Then we have clash is like any sessions which were clashed in the sense with the same source destination, same port, same destination port, source port, there is already a connection exist and a new session again came which is also with the same detail. So in that case there will be a possible clash into the session table, and session classes are not good for production and we should try to avoid them. Generally these occurs due to net port exhaustion. So it's not only it's net port exhaustion. Then we can see memory tension drop. So memory tension drop is any new connections which are being dropped because of a memory low memory, because of low memory. Ephemeral connections. So what is ephemeral connections? Ephemeral is, we can say, half open. When we say talk about TCP, we see half open connections. Half open connections are when there is a SYN packet has been seen but there is no further actions onto that. So this can also increase in case of some SYN DOS attacks, or where someone is trying to exploit the network by just sending so many SYNs but there is no actual handshake completed, and these are half open. So ephemeral connections are the half open connections. Yep. So after ephemeral, we can see here the last line, which is global. These are the limits or the number of sessions that your firewall can handle if there is any hardware limit defined. But if you see zero means that there is no hardware session limits and it's unlimited. But based on how much the platform can handle, that varies. But by configuration or by hard limits, there is no limit for the number of sessions. So this you can see here in the session limit. This is for like IPv4, session 6 limit is for IPv6 limit. So this 0 means like no limit. There is no hard limit, but depending on the performance, the number of sessions may vary depending on the firewall. Then also we see here the TCP sessions. So out of this total count, how many sessions are TCP sessions, and out of those how many are in established state, or how many are in time wait state or in closed state. So these are different states of TCP. So established is a fully working connection where a three-way handshake has been done and the connection is in active mode. Time wait is like there is a timeout for each connection. So if there is a handshake and then it's waiting for the timeout, then it's time wait state. And close state means the connection has been completed and it's about to close, so it stays in the close state for some time based on the timers configured, and then the session gets closed. So this session explains about TCP states, or I can mention also here, let me mention this part. This part is TCP states. I will say TCP state of the connections. Okay, so that's fine now. TCP state of the connections. Okay, so this is all about diagnosis session state. Now further moving on to this same command and into the next part. So okay, now diagnosis session state was giving us what is the current statistics or stats for the sessions. But if you want to list out all the connections, then we use diagnosis session list. And diagnosis session list may give a huge output, very huge output based on the number of connections that are being handled by your firewall. So let's say your firewall is having millions of connections, then this output is going to be very huge, and it may take 10-15 minutes to print because that is a live session. Excuse me, live session connections. Now to explain you what this diagnosis session list tells us. So if you run diagnosis session list, you will see these entries, like for each session that is established, or that is that exists on the firewall. So in this table or in this output, you can see first tells us the protocol, means what is the kind of protocol for this session. So the protocol 17 means that's a TCP session. This I will tell you in the next slide, like what are the different protocol numbers. So protocol 17 is like TCP. Then you have protocol state, like what is the protocol state, whether it's established or waiting for something. So that's the protocol state. Then we have here in this line, we are explaining, it tells us about which device in the cluster is handling this particular connection. So if you say, let's say HAID 0, means if there are two members in the cluster, then the member 0 or the primary is handling this connection. So this HAID tells us like HA member ID who is processing the connection, or you can say session or connection. Then we have helper. So helper tells us if this particular session is using any helper. Helpers are generally used for DNS traffic or SIP traffic. So there are already some predefined helpers that are configured in the firewall. So if any of these helpers is being used for this session, then it will show here the name of the helper. Helper, what is helper? Helper is assists us in creating a bi-directional policy by default. So let's say because it's a DNS or UDP, depending on the traffic, if there is a source to destination is allowed, or you can say it uses random ports. Let's say in case of SIP traffic, the ports are random. So based on the inspection of the packets, it can detect the port number from the header or from the payload, and then accordingly it can allow the rules. So for that, helper is being used. Then we have got, this is our actual traffic, where it says origin means what is the original request. So original request is, this is from this source to this destination, and this tells us about the original packet. And this is the second line, is the reply packet, like how the reply for this. Then this comes to the policy ID. So you can see like which particular policy ID is matching for this connection. This option tells us about the policy ID. Then similarly, if you are using any web filtering or application control, then you can see here the URL category, like what is the category of the website or URL you are browsing. So here we can see the category number. This will be a number, and based on the configuration, you can see like this number belongs to which category. and then this serial number is unique for each session. So serial number helps us in finding out, let's say, if this particular session is being synchronized onto the secondary firewall or not. So if you can grab it using the serial number, that tells us this is exactly the same connection. So based on the serial numbers, we can identify a unique session or unique transaction. So this serial number is unique to this session. And NPU state, this tells us about the whether the session is being offloaded to NPU or not. So there are different numbers here in the NPU state, like 4-5 states, which I had explained in one of my earlier videos of session not offloading. So you can check out that video for further getting the different values of this NPU state. So now you can see, like, the diag session list, this will help you to know all the details for a particular session. Now, as I told you, this command gives you a huge output. Now, what if you are looking for a particular session, particular source IP or particular destination IP? So you can filter this entire list based on a particular source and particular destination. For that, we use something called uh, session filter. But before going to the session filter, let me tell you the protocol states. As you have seen here, the first protocol equal to 17. So there are different protocol numbers for that. Let's say 17 is sorry, in the previous I told TCP. I'm really very sorry for that. So 17 is the UDP. Protocol number 6 is for TCP. Protocol number 1 is for ICMP, and 50. Generally these are the values which you will see, but apart from that there are like many other numbers which can be there, but most of the time you will be seeing only out of these, either TCP UDP or related to VPN or ICMP. So as it's clear now about session list, now let's go to diag session filter. As we discussed, like diag session list gives us a huge output based on all the sessions that are currently exist on, but we are interested to look up or to look into a specific connection. So let's go and check out the diag session filter. So in the same command, if you simply run a diag session list, this is something output you get where no filter is applied. Like you will be able to see all the connections. Now, what are the different values based on which you can apply a filter? So if you want to see what is the current filter, you can put diag session filter and it will show sorry, it will show you what filter is currently applied. So as from this output you can see I have applied a filter which is only for 10.100.50 IP address. So if I run a command now with diag session filter, it will only show me the sessions which are with this source IP. Let's go deeper into this. As I explained, diag session filter, if you do, it shows us any filter that is already applied. And to clear this filter, we should do diag session filter clear. So once you run this command diag session filter clear, the filter will be cleared. See, you can see here the filter was applied for source IP address, but now after I clear the filter, I can see there is no source IP filter here and it's all any. So if it is everything is any, that means the entire session list is going to be displayed, which might be huge. This session filter helps us in troubleshooting a specific connection issue. Let's say you want to troubleshoot, like this is the source IP of my client and he is going to google.com, but it's not working. So in that case, we will be applying this. I will be showing you all this. Before that, let me show you diag session list first. Okay. Let me show you diag session filter first. Okay, let's go. Coming to our firewall, if I do a diag session list, what it shows, it gave me a huge number of connections. It's not huge for me because it's just a lab device, so I am only able to see 20 connections onto this. And if I see diag session filter, what is a filter? There is no filter currently applied. As you can see, there is no filter currently applied. But if I want to apply a filter, I can do diag session filter and source. Let's say source. What is the source? 10.100.0.50. So if I put this filter, so now if I again see diag session filter, see, you can see here the filter is applied now. And now if I do diag session list after applying the filter, make sure, so filter applied, once filter is applied, then again you have to use the same command to list out the sessions based on the filter. So if you see, now I am getting 0 sessions because I put a specific filter to list out all the sessions. But there is total session is 0 because there is no connection which exists for this IP. Let me just make a connection and we'll see whether the filter is working properly or not. Okay, this is my machine. I will just try to do a google.com, let's say. Okay, this is my test machine. So if I do now, see, you can see now you have a connection which exists from 10.100.0.50 going to a Google IP address, the DNS, and here this. So now it will display all the connections related to this particular IP. So earlier you could have seen, see, now if I do diag session filter clear, I'm clearing it, and if I do diag session list, you can see all the connections, 20 connections are listed. But if I do diag session filter and I will put based on 10.100.0.50 and diag session list, see, you can see only 2 connections, but without filter it was, let me clear it again just for your reference again, diag session filter and clear. And now if I do diag session list, again you can see all connections are reported. So this is how the filter works. And filter I'm sorry, I got cold and cough today. Yeah, so this is how the filter works. So once, so that's basically I'm sorry, diag session list works based on the filter that is applied. So whatever filter you have applied using the diag session filter, based on that only diag session list is going to display the number of sessions. It's not only the list, but any further command onto the diag session will use this filter to perform the further action. As I already told you, or we have done it on the lab device, like what are the different options. Diag session filter, if you put, then you can see these are different values based on which you can apply the filter. If you do diag session filter, so these are the different values based on which you can apply a filter. It can be either source interface, destination interface, source, destination, or protocol. So basically any value from the session table, that is basically you can apply. And here clear is ultimately you clear the session filter. So as you can see in this example, I have applied a filter on the policy ID. Okay, let me show you one more example. Let me display the filter. Currently I have no filter. Now if I want to put a filter based on policy ID, diag session filter policy and policy 1, let's say I'm doing policy 1. Now if I apply policy 1, diag session list, no connections because I don't have any connections for policy ID 1. Let me make some test traffic and I will do this. Now let's list. So now you can see the traffic only related to policy ID 1 is shown here. Okay, so let's go back to our outputs. So this is how you can put the filter. Apart from the normal diag session list, we have a summarized output as well, but this you cannot use to get more details, but this will only list the source and the destination and the port. So instead of diag session list, you can use a get session status to see just the number of the connections, and get session list to see all a summarized output of the diag session list. So see, if you see diag session list, this gives a detailed output, but if you do get session list, this will just give you a summarized, like you see it on a Windows net stat output. So you can do a get session list and you can verify whether your connection exists on the firewall or not. So this is all about diag session. If you have any questions onto this or any clarifications required, you can always comment onto the video and I will be happy to assist you. And if you like my video, please do watch, like and subscribe. Thank you so much everyone. Thank you. Bye bye.